The wildest thing my straight roommate ever said to me wasn't that he wanted to date a man. It was that he wanted his first date with one to be with me. I had been home for maybe 3 minutes when Dean Hollis asked me to sit down. It was almost 11 on a Thursday night in our second-floor duplex in Waldo, and after 10 hours making food look unnaturally perfect for a commercial shoot, I wanted a shower in silence. Instead, I found Dean at our kitchen table, looking like he'd been waiting for me. "Everything okay?" I asked, dropping my keys beside the fruit bowl. Dean nodded. "Yeah, I just need to ask you something." I stayed standing. That sentence has never made anyone relax. Usually, Dean would have laughed. He didn't. That got my attention. I pulled out the chair across from him. His tan work shirt and canvas field jacket were hanging over the chair beside him, leftovers from another day inspecting trees around Kansas City. His ash blonde hair was still damp from a shower, and he looked completely sober, completely awake, and strangely nervous. We'd been roommates for almost 2 years. Before that, we had been strangers connected by a roommate listing Dean had posted after finding the duplex, and deciding the rent made more sense split 2 ways. I had needed a place, we had met for coffee, decided neither of us seemed impossible to live with, and applied together. Somehow, a practical arrangement between 2 strangers had turned into the easiest home either of us had expected. Nearly 2 years was long enough for me to know Dean was not easily rattled. Nervous was not his normal setting. Earlier that week, I had mentioned that a guy I had met through a friend had asked if I wanted to get coffee that weekend. I had not thought much of it. I had gone on dates before, usually pleasant enough and rarely leading anywhere serious. Dean had only said, "You going?" I told him I had not decided yet. At the time, the conversation had seemed forgettable. Sitting across from him now, I wondered if it had not been forgettable to Dean. "Okay," I said. "Ask." Dean rubbed one hand across his jaw. Then he looked directly at me. "Would it be crazy if I asked you to take me on a date?" I laughed. I honestly thought that was the appropriate response. Dean didn't. My smile disappeared. "Wait, you're serious?" "Yeah. A date. A date. With me. That's generally how asking you works, Colin." "Dean, you're straight." His expression tightened, not defensively, but like he was trying to choose words he could stand behind. "That's what I've always called myself." I leaned back. Suddenly, our familiar kitchen felt different. Dean and I were friends, not merely 2 guys splitting rent. We knew each other's schedules, takeout orders, bad habits, and which cabinet door needed to be lifted before it would close. But there had never been anything romantic between us. At least, nothing I'd allowed myself to name. "Are you asking me to take you somewhere because you want to see what dating a guy is like?" I asked. "No." "You want me to take you to a gay bar?" "No." "Give you advice?" "No." He paused. "And before you ask, I'm not asking you to kiss me so I can see how that feels either." That answer unsettled me more than any of the others. This wasn't some impulsive experiment he'd invented 10 minutes earlier. "Then what exactly are you asking?" Dean held my gaze. "I'm asking if you'd go out with me. Dinner, coffee, whatever. A real date. You and me." I should have answered. Instead, I discovered that I couldn't. The problem wasn't that the idea seemed ridiculous. The problem was that it didn't. Dean was attractive, kind, funny in a way that sneaked up on you, and already more important to me than I'd ever planned for a roommate to become. There had been moments when I had noticed him too closely, then shut the thought down before it could become anything else. Dean was straight. Dean was my roommate. Those had always seemed like 2 very good reasons not to examine a passing attraction too carefully. Now he had removed one of those assumptions himself. Saying yes could change the safest friendship in my life. Saying no might change it anyway. So I stood. "I can't answer that tonight." Dean nodded once. "Okay." No pressure. No sales pitch. That somehow made walking away harder. I reached the hallway, stopped, and turned back. There was one question I couldn't carry into my bedroom unanswered. "Why me?" Dean was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's the part I'm trying to stop lying to myself about." The next morning, I found Dean in the kitchen before either of us had left for work. He was pouring coffee into a travel mug, already dressed in his tan work shirt and charcoal work pants. When I said, "About last night," his hand stopped on the lid. Okay, I had spent more time awake than I wanted to admit, and I had reached one conclusion. Avoiding the conversation would not protect our friendship. It would only make our apartment uncomfortable. "If you are curious about men, that is fine," I said. But I cannot be the person you use to figure out whether you like dating one. Dean set the mug down. I know. I mean it. I am not volunteering to be somebody's safe experiment because I happen to be gay and already live down the hall. That is not what I am asking you to be. There was no defensiveness in his voice, which made it easier for me to continue. Then help me understand what changed. Dean considered that. I do not think one thing changed. He leaned against the counter. It has been little things for a while. I notice when you were supposed to be home. If you were late, I catch myself wondering how your day went. And somewhere along the way, the things you told me stopped feeling like roommate information and started feeling important. I folded my arms. Friends do that. I know. Roommates notice each other's schedules. I know that too. Dean gave a small, frustrated smile. That is why I did not say anything for months. That was new. I had assumed his question had been sudden. Apparently, only asking it had been. What else? I asked. Dean looked down at his coffee before answering. When you go on dates, I noticed that too. I raised an eyebrow. Jealous. Sometimes uncomfortable. I am not going to call it jealousy when I am still trying to understand it. He hesitated. When you mentioned that coffee date earlier this week, I realized I was hoping you would not go. I studied him. Is that why you finally asked me? Partly. Not because I thought I had some claim on you. I just realized I had spent months waiting for these feelings to explain themselves, and meanwhile your life was going to keep moving. The answer made more sense than I wanted it to. I had dated occasionally since Dean and I became roommates, but nothing had turned into a relationship. That did not mean the next person would disappear just as easily. The distinction mattered. Dean was not pretending to have answers just because I wanted them. None of that proves you are romantically attracted to me, I said. I know. You could just be attached to me. I know. You say that a lot. Because you keep making reasonable points. I almost smiled. Almost. So what are you proposing? One date. Dean's answer came without hesitation. A real one. No physical expectations. No test at the end. We go somewhere, spend time together as two people who agreed it is a date, and afterward we tell each other the truth. And if you realize this is friendship, I tell you. And if I decide I am uncomfortable, you tell me. It was almost annoyingly sensible. I had expected uncertainty from Dean, but not carelessness, and those were not the same thing. He was uncertain about himself. He was being very careful with me. I looked toward the clock over the stove. We both needed to leave soon. All right, I said. Dean blinked. All right. One date. His expression changed, but before he could say anything, I held up a hand. There is one condition. Name it. You plan it. Why? Because you asked me out. I am not designing your first date with a man for you. If you want this, make a choice and own it. Dean thought for a second, then nodded. Fair. He picked up his travel mug and headed toward the door, stopping long enough to look back at me. Saturday night. Saturday night. I will figure out the rest. Then he left for work, and for the first time since he had asked me out, I was no longer wondering whether there would be a date. There would be. And Dean was the one responsible for deciding what that meant. Saturday night felt strange before we even left the duplex. Dean had told me to be ready at 7, which was apparently the only information I was getting. I came downstairs in my cream Henley, brown corduroy overshirt, dark jeans, and sneakers and found him waiting near the front door. You look nervous, I said. I am taking my roommate on a date. There is not exactly a manual for this. There probably is. The internet has manuals for everything. That finally made him laugh, and some of the tension disappeared. A little after 7, Dean drove us to a neighborhood diner about 15 minutes from the duplex, a place we had passed dozens of times without ever stopping. I had expected him to choose somewhere that made a statement. Instead, he chose somewhere ordinary. That turned out to be exactly right. We slid into a booth across from each other, opened our menus, and immediately encountered our first problem. This feels different, Dean said. We have eaten together more times than I can count. Not while officially calling it a date. Maybe saying it out loud is the problem. You are the one who asked for one. Fair point. The awkwardness lasted through ordering and about half of my iced tea. Then something shifted. Dean asked about the commercial shoot I had complained about Thursday night, and instead of letting me dismiss it as another long day, he wanted to know what I actually did. I explained how food styling was less about cooking than controlling what a camera saw, how something that looked effortless on screen might require an hour of adjustments. So your entire profession is making food lie convincingly, Dean said. That is offensive. Is it inaccurate? No, but it is still offensive. I asked about his week, and 5 minutes later Dean was explaining why a mature street maple could look healthy to most people while showing signs of serious decline to an arborist. You know, you have been talking about this tree for 6 minutes, I said. You spent 10 minutes explaining hamburger buns. Mine had sesame seeds. More visual interest. He shook his head, smiling, and suddenly we were not performing a date anymore. We were just Colin and Dean, except I was noticing things I had trained myself not to notice at home. How closely he listened, how easily he remembered details, how comfortable. Silence felt between us. When the check arrived, Dean reached for it first. I asked you out. I let him pay. He had earned that much. The drive back to Waldo was quieter, but not uncomfortable. At the duplex, we stopped near the front steps. I became aware of the usual expectations attached to the end of a date, and apparently Dean did too. He kept a respectful distance. No awkward attempt to touch me. No suggestion that we needed to prove anything. I know enough now to answer one question, he said. Which one? Dean looked directly at me. I was not curious about going on a date with a guy. I wanted to go on a date with you. For several seconds, I had nothing clever to say. The distinction was simple, but it changed everything. Until that moment, I could still tell myself I was helping Dean investigate a possibility. Now he had removed that explanation himself. Good night, Dean, I finally said. Good night, Colin. We went inside together, then separated at the hallway like we had on countless nights before. But when I closed my bedroom door, I knew one thing with uncomfortable certainty. Whatever happened next, I could no longer pretend Saturday had been an experiment. By Monday morning, the duplex looked exactly the same, but I no longer experienced it the same way. Ordinary things I had ignored for nearly 2 years now carried possibilities neither of us had named. We did not rush to define anything after one date, which felt sensible, but I also knew staying inside our familiar apartment routines would tell me very little about what Dean actually wanted. On Thursday evening, that changed when he mentioned a Saturday tree planting project at a community garden. You should come by, he said. Are you recruiting free labor? I was thinking moral support, but I will accept free labor. I agreed, partly because I was curious to see him somewhere that was not our apartment. Saturday morning, I brought food for the volunteers and found Dean already working with a small group near a row of newly prepared planting sites. In his tan work shirt, charcoal work pants, and brown work boots, he seemed completely at home. He moved between volunteers answering questions, checking planting depth, and explaining why a young tree needed room around its root flare. He was patient without being patronizing and confident without needing anyone to notice. I found myself noticing anyway. At one point he caught me watching him and walked over. You came to help, remember? I brought lunch. That qualifies. You arranged sandwiches on trays. Presentation matters. They are volunteers, Colin. They are going to eat them. And they can eat something attractive. Dean laughed and went back to work. For a while, the whole morning felt unexpectedly comfortable. Then, as we were packing up, a man Dean knew from another neighborhood project stopped beside us. They talked briefly about a damaged tree nearby before the man glanced at me. You Dean's roommate? He asked. It was an ordinary question. I expected an ordinary answer. Dean hesitated. It could not have been more than a second. Yeah, he said. This is Colin. I smiled, shook the man's hand, and said nothing. Dean had not lied. I was his roommate. We had been on exactly one date, and neither of us had defined what came next. Still, that single pause followed me home. I tried to be reasonable about it. Maybe Dean had simply wondered whether to say more. Maybe he had no idea what word he was supposed to use. But another possibility existed now, and pretending otherwise would have been dishonest. Dean might be comfortable wanting me inside our duplex, and still have no idea whether he could acknowledge that possibility when someone else was standing there. I did not accuse him. I did not punish him for a hesitation I had not yet understood. But I also knew I was not going on a second date, while silently guessing what that moment had meant. By the time we reached home, I had made a decision. Before Dean and I went anywhere together again, we were going to have an honest conversation. That evening, I found Dean on the screened back porch with a glass of iced tea and told him I wanted to talk. He looked at my face, set the glass down, and said, "This is about this morning. It is about 1 second this morning." Dean leaned back in his chair. When he asked if you were my roommate, you hesitated. I did. I sat across from him. I am not asking you to suddenly pick a label or introduce me as your boyfriend after one date. But if this keeps going, what exactly are you asking me to become? His brow tightened. What does that mean? I cannot be someone you want in private and then hesitate to acknowledge when another person is standing there. Dean stared at me for a moment. You think I was embarrassed? I think it is possible. You could have asked. That is what I am doing now. No, Colin. You already decided what the answer probably was, and now you are asking me to defend myself against it. That landed harder than I expected because he was right about part of it. I had spent the entire drive home building an explanation without giving him a chance to provide one. Then tell me what happened, I said. Dean looked through the porch screen toward the backyard before answering. I hesitated because I almost said you were the guy I was dating. Why did that stop you? Because I did not know if I had the right to say it. I said nothing. Dean continued. We went on one date. We never agreed on what came next. I did not want the first time I defined this to happen in front of somebody else before I had even asked you what you wanted. The explanation was so reasonable that my certainty from earlier began collapsing. But Dean was not finished. And yes, I am scared, Colin. Just not of the thing you think I am scared of. Then what are you scared of? His voice softened. Losing this. He gestured toward the duplex behind us. Not the building. You. Us. Nearly 2 years of coming home and knowing you are here. Coffee in the morning. Complaining about work in the kitchen. Knowing which takeout you will order before you say it. Having somebody I tell things to before I even realize I wanted to tell anyone. Somewhere along the way, this stopped feeling like two roommates splitting rent to me. It started feeling like home. We already have something good, and I am asking us to change it while I am still figuring out a part of myself I thought I understood. That stopped me. I had spent so much time measuring what Dean's uncertainty could cost me that I had barely considered what my answer could cost him. I did not think about it that way. I know. There was no satisfaction in his answer. That made it worse. I was trying to protect myself, I said. I understand that. But I cannot keep proving I am serious while you stand far enough away that none of this can hurt you. I wanted to argue, but I could not find an honest argument. I had demanded that Dean take responsibility for asking me out, then watched every move he made for evidence that I should retreat. So what happens now? I asked. Dean picked up his glass, but did not drink from it. Nothing for a while. Nothing. You wanted to know whether I could respect your boundaries. I can. I am going to give you space, Colin. He stood and opened the porch door. Before going inside, he looked back at me. If there is another date, I do not think I should be the one asking for it. For the next few days, Dean did exactly what he said he would do. He did not become cold, and he did not make the duplex uncomfortable. He still said good morning when our schedules overlapped, still replaced the coffee when he finished the bag, and still asked whether I needed anything when he stopped at the grocery store. What disappeared were the small choices that had started feeling different after our date. He did not linger in the kitchen when I came home. He did not suggest another Saturday together. He did not make me responsible for deciding whether every ordinary kindness meant something more. He gave me space, and I discovered I did not enjoy having it. By Wednesday, I was at the commercial food photography studio preparing a plate of pasta for a restaurant advertisement when something ridiculous happened. The photographer complained that one basil leaf looked wrong, and it immediately reminded me of Dean joking that my profession was organized deception. I almost reached for my phone to tell him. Then I stopped. That was when I understood what had been bothering me. I did not miss being pursued. I missed Dean. I missed telling him insignificant things because somehow they became worth telling when he was the person listening. More importantly, I finally saw the imbalance I had created. Dean had asked the first dangerous question. Dean had planned the first date. Dean had explained what he felt even when he could not explain what label belonged to it. I had responded by standing behind a boundary and asking him to keep proving that crossing it would be safe for me. My caution had been reasonable. Expecting him to carry all the uncertainty had not been. The next afternoon, I finished work early. I knew I could wait a few hours and talk to Dean when he came home, but that suddenly felt too easy. He had been the one to cross the distance between us every time that mattered. If I was going to ask for another date, I wanted at least one part of the effort to belong entirely to me. I drove to the municipal tree nursery near the end of his workday, after most of the crews had already cleared out. I stayed outside near the office rather than going in and waited until Dean finished. He came out in his tan work shirt and charcoal work pants, looking surprised to see me. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes." I took a breath. "You planned the first date?" I think I owe you the second. Dean did not smile immediately. Colin, I am serious. Why? Because I want to go out with you. He studied me for a moment. Because you miss me, or because you feel guilty? It was a fair question, and I was glad he asked it. I do miss you, but that is not the reason I drove here. I stepped a little closer, leaving enough distance that neither of us had to pretend this conversation was more settled than it was. I finally realized I have been asking you to take all the risk. You had to figure out what you felt, explain it to me, plan the date, and prove you meant it. Meanwhile, I got to stand there deciding whether your answers were good enough. Dean looked down briefly, then back at me. You were protecting yourself. I was. But there is a difference between protecting myself and making you do all the vulnerable parts. For the first time since Saturday, some of the tension left his face. So what are you proposing? Dinner Saturday, I said. My plan this time. And the same rules you gave me on the first date. No pressure. We just tell each other the truth. Dean smiled. Those were pretty good rules. Do not get smug. Saturday night. Saturday night. This time, when we walked toward the parking lot, Dean was not trying to convince me of anything. He had already taken his turn. Now the next choice belonged to me. Saturday evening, I learned that planning a date for someone who already knew most of my habits was harder than styling food for a camera. I finally decided that trying to impress Dean would defeat the point. I packed a simple picnic dinner, including sandwiches that I deliberately did not arrange like they were waiting for a photographer, and we drove to a quiet green space near an area where Dean had finished a tree inspection earlier that week. When I opened the container, he stared at the sandwiches. They are crooked. I know. The tomatoes are uneven. Also intentional. Dean looked genuinely concerned. Are you feeling all right? This is food for eating, Dean, not food for selling. I am witnessing professional growth. I laughed, and that was exactly what I had wanted. Our first date had carried the weight of a question neither of us understood. This one felt different because we had already stopped pretending there was no risk. We ate while the evening cooled around us, talking about work, our apartment, and nothing important until Dean eventually became quiet. I have been thinking about something, he said. That sounds dangerous. I still do not know what word I am supposed to use for myself. I waited. Dean continued. Straight is the word I have used my entire adult life. Now I am sitting here on a second date with you, and I wanted this date. That is true too. A few weeks earlier, I would have wanted him to solve the contradiction before asking me to trust him. Now I understood that honesty did not always arrive with a finished answer. Then do not pick a word for my sake, I said. Dean studied my face. That does not bother you. Uncertainty bothers me. Pretending certainty would bother me more. He nodded slowly. So what do we do with that? We stop treating your label like it is the only decision here. What decision matters more? Whether you want to keep doing this. Dean smiled slightly. I do. So do I. The simplicity of saying it surprised me. No dramatic revelation followed. Nothing about Dean's past suddenly changed. He was still the same man who had spent years understanding himself one way and had now encountered something that did not fit neatly inside it. The difference was that neither of us was asking uncertainty to make the decision for us. We packed the containers when the light began fading and walked back toward the car. Near the edge of the parking area, Dean stopped. His expression had changed, serious without being tense. Can I ask you something? You have developed a reputation for that. He laughed once, then looked at me again. Can I kiss you? There was no test hidden inside the question. No audience. No expectation that one kiss would explain everything. Dean was asking because he wanted to kiss me, and I finally trusted myself enough to answer for the same reason. Yes. He stepped closer and kissed me. It was brief, gentle, and unmistakably intentional. When we separated, Dean looked relieved and a little amused at himself. I still do not know what this makes me. I smiled. It makes you the guy who just kissed his roommate. Dean shook his head, smiling. No, the guy I am dating. That was the answer that mattered. Not because every uncertainty had disappeared, but because we had stopped requiring certainty before making an honest choice. Calling us that here, alone with me, was one thing. Neither of us pretended Dean already knew how it would feel to say the same words when someone else was listening. We walked the rest of the way to the car together, and for the first time since all of this began, neither of us was trying to prove what we felt. We had chosen what to do with it. The first few weeks of dating Dean were less dramatic than everything that had led us there, and I was grateful for that. We still lived in separate bedrooms. We still argued about whose turn it was to buy coffee. We still occasionally spent an entire evening doing different things in the same room. The difference was that now Dean might reach for my hand when we walked somewhere together, or I might bring dinner home because I knew he had spent 10 hours outside inspecting trees. None of it felt like a performance. About 2 weeks in, Dean told me he had been thinking about telling someone close to him about us. He said it carefully, not because he was reconsidering me, but because saying it outside the duplex would make this part of his life visible in a way it had never been before. "You do not have to do that for me," I told him. "I know," he said. "That is why I think I am ready to." I did not ask when he would do it. A few days later, over dinner, he told me he had. "What did you tell them?" I asked. "That I am dating you." "And?" "They asked if you are the roommate who makes fake ice cream for commercials." I put down my fork. "It is not fake. It is shortening." That distinction did not help when I explained it. I laughed, and Dean did too. There was no grand declaration attached to the conversation. He had simply begun treating our relationship as a fact instead of a question. About a week after Dean told someone close to him about us, I stopped by the municipal tree nursery after work with takeout for him. He was finishing up when one of his co-workers walked past us and nodded toward the bag in my hand. "You too heading somewhere?" For one brief second, Dean paused. A few weeks earlier, I would have filled that silence with every explanation I feared. This time I waited. Dean glanced at me, then back at his co-worker. "Yeah, dinner. Colin and I are dating." His co-worker smiled. "Nice. Have a good night." Then he kept walking. That was all. No announcement. No spectacle. Once we were alone, Dean looked at me. I almost made that weird. I noticed. I was trying to figure out whether saying we were dating was okay with you. I figured. He raised an eyebrow. "You did not assume I was embarrassed?" I considered waiting 3 seconds for evidence. Dean smiled. "Look at you, developing patience. Do not get used to it." That tiny exchange mattered more than I expected. Dean was learning how to include me in a part of his life he had never expected to share with a man, and I was learning not to turn every unfamiliar pause into rejection. Then, near the end of the month, an envelope from our landlord arrived with the renewal paperwork for the duplex. Our lease would expire in several weeks. I stood at the kitchen counter looking at our names printed on the forms, Colin Kessler and Dean Hollis, and felt the practical weight of what had changed. Renewing together had been automatic the last time. Now we were roommates who had become a couple, and signing another lease meant choosing to keep sharing a home while discovering whether this relationship could last. I did not assume what Dean wanted. I left the paperwork on the counter where both of us could see it. For the first time, uncertainty did not feel like a warning. It felt like a conversation we were finally ready to have. Dean brought up the lease 2 nights later while we were cleaning up after dinner. He picked up the renewal papers from the kitchen counter and said, "I think we should sign." I looked at him. "You want to stay? I like this place." He smiled. "More importantly, I like who lives here." The answer was simple, but I needed to make sure we were choosing rather than drifting into another year because it was convenient. You know, renewing as a couple is different from renewing as roommates. I know. That is why I am saying it instead of assuming. I nodded. "Then I want to stay too." Dean reached for a pen, then stopped. "Before we sign, there is something I want you to see." He opened a drawer near the refrigerator and took out a folded sheet of paper. "I wrote this before I asked you out." He handed it to me. There was a date at the top, followed by a short list in Dean's handwriting. A good roommate. The person who made this place feel like home. The person I told things first. The easiest friendship I had ever had. Then, separated from the others, one final line. Maybe the chance at something better. I looked at him. "You already knew what you could lose?" Dean nodded. That changed something I thought I had already understood. From the beginning, I had believed I was the person standing closest to the edge. Dean had been uncertain about his sexuality, while I had known exactly what dating another man could mean. I had worried about becoming an experiment, but Dean had not walked into that first conversation without understanding the cost. He had made a list of it. "Why did you ask me anyway?" I said quietly. Dean rested one hand on the counter between us. "You asked me that the first night, and I do not think I answered it right." He took a breath. "Because you were already the person I was most afraid to lose." I looked at the paper again, then folded it carefully and handed it back. "That was a terrible risk assessment for an arborist." Dean laughed. "Probably. You were supposed to identify hazards before they become problems." I identified the hazard. I just decided you were worth it. I smiled, reached across the counter, and took his hand. Dean squeezed mine, then leaned toward me. I met him halfway, and we shared a gentle kiss in the same kitchen where all of this had started. There was nothing uncertain about why we kissed this time. When we pulled apart, I slid the renewal papers toward him. Your turn. Dean signed his name and passed the pen to me. I signed mine beneath his. 2 names on another lease did not promise that everything ahead would be easy. It simply meant we were choosing the next part together instead of demanding guarantees before we began. I looked at him. So still straight. Dean gave me the expression he used when I asked something deliberately annoying. Still figuring that part out. Then his expression softened. Not figuring you out, though. That was enough. The kitchen was still the same slightly cramped room with the stubborn cabinet door and the counter where we left our keys. We still had separate bedrooms down the hall, jobs that started at different hours, and a relationship new enough that neither of us could predict exactly what it would become. But that night, the duplex stopped feeling like a place 2 roommates happened to share. It felt like a home 2 people had consciously chosen to keep building together. Sometimes the words we use to understand ourselves arrive later than the feelings that make us question them. There are moments when certainty can feel like the safest requirement before taking an emotional risk, but maybe honesty asks for something different. Being clear about what we know without pretending to know what we do not. I had to learn that protecting my heart did not require predicting Dean's intentions, while Dean needed room to understand himself without promising answers he had not found yet. What made our relationship possible was not the disappearance of uncertainty. It was realizing that neither of us should have to carry all of it alone. Perhaps trust sometimes begins there, not with a guarantee about where a relationship will end, but with 2 people being honest about why they are choosing its next step together. If you had been in my position, how much uncertainty would you have been willing to accept from someone who was still figuring himself out? What would you have needed before deciding the relationship was worth the risk?